Nuclear problem, what is it? They have nuclear weapons. Solution, we are the sole superpower, we go out and smash those people. And I think the Iraq War was really intended to be a sort of demonstration project for American power around the world, and North Korea was going to get it next, and maybe it would be Syria or whatever countries they happened to mention, and there was quite a list that they did mention. Well, it's not a secret that this vision of the world has come a cropper. It's really crashing and burning. Turned out there were no weapons of mass destruction, as we all know, in Iraq, including no nuclear weapons. And I think the country is a little bit like an alcoholic waking up from a binge. And so there's some fresh opportunity here. Of course, in the meantime, North Korea became a nuclear power. Iran is just sailing ahead very nicely, adding a couple of thousand centrifuges every year or so. And then there's all the other signs of sort of imperial overreach and decline. We're buying billions of dollars worth of foreign goods we can't afford, buying housing with money we didn't have, and so on and so forth. So there's a kind of bursting of the imperial bubble, so to speak. And we see, you might say that the superpower idea was a super illusion, and now we're beginning to snap out of it. And the reality, I want to suggest, is a very ordinary and common one that we should have seen all along, and that is that we're one country among many, a very powerful one to be sure, maybe even the most powerful, but only one, inhabiting a planet placed at risk by our collective actions. In other words, we belong to what the diplomat George Kennan of Princeton nearby once called a community of fate, which is, I think, a nice phrase. Or also what Martin Luther King called an inescapable network of mutuality tied in a single garment of destiny. And these were profound moral insights that were also practical, and of course King called himself a practical idealist. I'd add another to these. We're in a church after all, and that's that they that live by the sword shall die by the sword, which becomes even more literally true if you say that they that live by the bomb will die by the bomb. For we are part of the world, resident here on earth with other countries, and that earth is in trouble. Now I want to talk about what I think might be a new context that is put in place by these fresh events of the last few years for thinking about the nuclear danger in a way that we might present it to our fellow citizens and see if we can spark their interest. And by the way, I feel there is a sort of resurgence of interest, and I think maybe you feel that here at the Coalition. There's a kind of waking up. I feel it at Yale, where I've been teaching. I have rising numbers of students who are taking a lecture course I give on the subject. I'm not sure what their interest is, but they're very engaged. They're learning. I don't know if they agree with me or not. I let them know what I think. But anyway, of course, at the top of the list of the new elements would be the global warming threat, which is getting finally the attention, if not the action, that it deserves. And arrayed around that is a large panoply of ecological dangers of tremendous and global scope and range, from the crashing fisheries to the unparalleled extinctions that are occurring among species of all kinds, the greatest in certainly more than the human era, going back, and I don't know what era it goes back to, but maybe 500 million years. And so I think that all of this provides a new context for talking about the nuclear question. Now, why is that? One thing is that the nuclear issue, the nuclear danger, was born in a day before ecological consciousness had arisen. It really grew up in a context of war, and so we've tended to think of it solely in the context of military things, which is a little bit futile, because really you can't fight a war with nuclear weapons. What you would get with them isn't a war at all. They transcend war. They don't belong in the framework of war. I think people are beginning to understand that more and more. Whereas on the other hand, the ecological question arose out of economic activity. But actually, and this is something I believed all along, the nuclear threat in its largest dimensions has always been primarily an ecological one, in the sense that it's the destruction of the life support systems on Earth, from the ozone layer, the fallout the firestorms, the nuclear winter, and so on and so forth, that really could put our species at risk in the event of a nuclear holocaust, as much as the direct death and destruction of those weapons. So I've always believed that it should be seen in an ecological context. And so I think we need to draw those connections. Because after all, what are our responsibilities as human beings, as individuals in societies, set down on this earth, in this particular moment, at this juncture in the story of humankind, and indeed of life on earth? The poor you always have with you, and we have them still, and we have it in new versions, as we see. We're causing famines around the world by fueling up our SUVs with biofuels and so on. So it's one big vortex here that we're dealing with that encompasses scarce resources, environmental destruction, and I would argue the nuclear danger. And of course, oppression and injustice still hold sway. And those responsibilities claim us, and you address them here at the Coalition, as they always have, if not more so. But I would say that a new array of unprecedented responsibilities has appeared before us. It began with the nuclear threat. It continued with the global warming and the other ecological threats I've spoken of. And I can summarize this as saying it's our responsibility to preserve the natural foundations of human and other life on Earth from human destruction. I think I'm free to use religious language in this place of worship. So I'd say it's more and more as if we are flinging the creation back in the Creator's face. As if to say, this wasn't good enough for us. We expected something better. As if to say, we weren't rich enough, or we weren't powerful enough, or we didn't have a big enough car. And I think we can say, in light of this, and once again to quote George Kennan, as he said once of nuclear weapons, this is an offense offered to God.
Yes.
You know, in the Bible we read, in the beginning God created heaven and earth. On the first day he created light, on the second the firmament, on the third the seas. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass and herbs yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And so on. But not until our time, when human beings acquired the power to unmake the creation, did these verses of Genesis become a political text, demanding a political response. And if we fail in this responsibility, not much else, and maybe nothing else, is going to matter. So this is the fresh urgency, this is the larger context in which I think we need to place our issue, to remind our brothers and sisters in the ecological movement that this is the king of the ecological dangers, and to try to get this issue out of this kind of mental ghetto that it somehow gets placed in. It has to do with daily life, it has to do with the continuation of life itself with our children and grandchildren. And it seems to me that this might offer a way to approach it that is fresh and new.